Norfolk and Western 611. After an absence of 21 years, this fine locomotive made a fabulous return back to the main line. In this video, we follow the fabulous J as she runs the Cavalier excursion between Lynchburg and Petersburg, Virginia. Besides 611, we see some other interesting sights along the way as well. Anyway, let's get on with the show. The date is June 13th, 2015. We are located at Norfolk Southern's Montview Yard in Lynchburg, Virginia, to witness a sight that has not been seen in many, many years.
North-south track, which means it's going to head towards it. This line heads towards Atlanta and Washington. It's going to have to go on wide somewhere up ahead and then turn. This train looks check.
With the passengers beginning to board the train, let's head up to the front to see the power. This is Norfolk and Western 611. She is a Class J 484 built on May 29, 1950 by the Norfolk and Western Railroad at their East End shops in Roanoke, Virginia. She was one of 14 engines built and was part of the third and final batch of J's to be built for the railroad. She represented the pinnacle of steam locomotive technology. A major note for 611's career took place on January 23, 1956. 611 was pulling the Pocahontas when she derailed on a curve near Cedar, West Virginia, along the Tug Fork River. As a result of the derailment, she was sent to the East End shops and was rebuilt and came back out later that same year, ready to pull more passenger trains. Sadly, her original career came to an end in 1959. Her last set of trains she pulled for the Norfolk and Western were 2 Farewell to Steam excursions. Ironically, thanks to her derailment in '56, she was the best out of all the remaining J's in terms of operational condition. In 1962, after serving as a stationary boiler for the East End shops, she was then donated to the Roanoke Transportation Museum, which later became the Virginia Museum of Transportation and remained on display there until October 13, 1981. To make a long story short, the Southern Railway purchased 611 with the intent of operating her for their steam program. In October of that year, she was then moved to the Southern Railway's Norris Yard steam shops in Irondale, Alabama for restoration. Then, on July 5, 1982, she was steamed up for the first time in 23 years. That same year, by no coincidence, the Southern Railway and the Norfolk and Western Railways merged to become today's Norfolk Southern Railroad, and by extension, the Southern Steam Program then became Norfolk Southern Steam Program. While there are many other steam locomotives that operated during the steam program that the Southern and later Norfolk Southern Railway ran, 611 became the queen of the steam program and ran many excursion trains across the newly formed system during the 1980s. Sadly, it all came to an end in 1994. That year, Norfolk Southern announced that they were ending their beloved steam program. She hauled her last excursion between Birmingham, Alabama and Chattanooga, Tennessee on December 3rd, and by December 7th, she arrived back in Roanoke, Virginia, and her fire was dropped. In 1995, she was then donated to the city of Roanoke, and later donated again to the Virginia Museum of Transportation, where she sat on display for many years. Of course, this was clearly not the end for 611. In 2005, Norfolk Southern acquired a new CEO, Charles Moorman, or Wick Moorman for short. He was a fan of big steam, and to make another long story short, in late 2011, the 21st Century Steam Program begun, with the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum and the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society joining the program. On the southern half of the NS system, TVRM operated Southern Railway 630. On the northern half of the system, Fort Wayne operated their Nickel Plate Road 765. Then, on February 22, 2013, the VMT announced the Fire Up 611 campaign with the goal of restoring and operating the J for the new steam program. Less than a year later, after raising nearly $4 million, 611, in agreement with the North Carolina Transportation Museum, was moved to their ex-Southern Railway Bob Julin Roundhouse, where the now second restoration began. The North Carolina Transportation Museum is located in Spencer, North Carolina. Then, on February 23, 2015, 611 passed her hydrostatic test and a month later rolled under her own steam once again and was able to run for the 2015 21st Century Steam Program. While there is now more to the story, we'll now end it off here as this video takes place in 2015. 611 ran many excursions for the 21st Century Steam Program in 2015. All of them were operated in the states of North Carolina and Virginia. The one we'll be seeing today was the Cavalier excursion, which ran between Lynchburg and Petersburg, Virginia, on the old Norfolk and Western main line. The train consisted of many passenger cars, while all the ones up front were Norfolk Southern's executive passenger cars, which resembled the old N&W passenger cars of the past. While we were over here, we also got a glimpse of the engine and car maintenance facility here in Mount View Yard. Located near the building was Norfolk Southern 5033, an EMD GP38-2 high hood. It fits right at home here, as it was built for the Southern Railway in 1972. Interestingly, a year after seeing 5033 here, it was sold to the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum. As soon as they acquired it, they traded 5033 for 5000 from Progress Rail. 5000 is the first GP38-2 high hood built for the Southern Railway. As we looked at the classic steamer, an NS intermodal train slowly rolled on by, led by NS 9658, 8984, and 9967, all three being GEC 40-9Ws. Interestingly, in 2017, 8984 was sent to GE's Fort Worth facilities in Texas and was rebuilt as a GE AC44C6M. It now wears the number 4126. As the passengers were still boarding, we'll now leave Montview Yard. The first place we saw the J was along East Brook Road along Route 660 just outside of Lynchburg. Here, the Norfolk Southern main line flies over Opossum Creek on this impressive steel trestle bridge. As soon as 611's train got across the bridge, the chase had begun. As we were trying to get to our next location, we paced the train a short distance along Highway 460 between West Lake Road and Ruritan Lane, west of Spout Springs, Virginia. After overtaking the train, we got to our first close-up shot at the Depot Lane/Road 674 railroad crossing along Highway 460, now east of Spout Springs. Right behind 611 was Norfolk and Western 1407, a former baggage/mail storage car built in 1927 by Bethlehem Steel. Today, it's owned by the Roanoke chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, and on this excursion was serving as 611's tool car. NS-42, the Tennessee, is a special combination coach, but instead of holding both passengers and baggage, this car carries both passengers and a generator to power the train. After seeing the train here, we got some pacing shots of the J. Unfortunately, I forget where exactly these shots were taken. All I know is that it happened between here and Green Bay, Virginia. After our pacing shots, we then move to the Twin Bridges Road / Road 623 bridge in Green Bay, Virginia. Here, the old N&W main line has a siding here, along with a classic N&W signal. Much of the main line we have been following between Lynchburg and Crewe, Virginia is single-tracked, with sidings along the line. From what I believe I was told back then, there was a fire somewhere along the line, causing a power outage in the area we are in now. With the power gone, the signals switched to battery power and went to red, forcing the excursion to make an unscheduled stop. NS quickly dispatched a crew to the signals here to sort out the problem. While they were doing that, 611 was given permission to continue down the line at restricting speed until they reached the town of Crewe.
A lot of people don't actually thinking about bringing it over. Is this a hill? Sounds like you have a pond.
Well, we couldn't ask for better.
Yeah, they do.
As the train made its way slowly down the line, the next spot we saw it at was at a service road near the intersection of Highway 360 and Twin Lakes / Great Lawn Road / Road 621. While the train rolls by here, let's get back to talking about the passenger cars on the train today. NS-46, the New Jersey, NS-43, the Iowa, NS-47, the Louisiana, NS-44, the Florida, are all regular seating cars, all built in 1950 by Pullman Standard Company for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, and that includes 42. NS-28 and 29 are both former Norfolk and Western Standard passenger cars, built in 1949. NS-26, the New York, was built by the Budd Company in 1947, originally for the New York Central Railroad, as their standard passenger car. While most of the NS passenger cars on this excursion are all still owned by Norfolk Southern, in 2017 the Tennessee was auctioned off by the railroad. We also got a unique undershot of the train as it rolled through this location. After NS-26, the New York was ex-Norfolk and Western 539. 539 is another coach built by the Pullman Standard Company in 1949 for the Norfolk and Western. Today, it's owned by the Watauga Valley Railroad Historical Society and Museum. The Watauga Valley also had two more of their passenger cars on this train today, ex-Florida East Coast 500 and ex-Southern Railway 2351. FEC 500, the St. Augustine, was another coach car built in 1954 by the Pullman Standard Company, and Southern Railway 2351, the Crescent Harbor, is a sleeper/lounge car, also built by the Pullman Standard Company between 1949 and 1950. The Crescent Harbor has two regular suite rooms, a master suite, a kitchen, and a lounge area. After seeing the train here, we then drove to Crewe, Virginia. Here, Norfolk Southern has a small yard. The town also acts as a division point on the railroad. Ever since we left Lynchburg, 611 has been traveling on the Blue Ridge District, which runs from here to Roanoke. The excursion will now enter onto the Norfolk District, which runs from here to its coastal namesake city. The town itself was founded in 1888 by the N&W, not only as a division point, but also as a central location for steam locomotive maintenance and repair shops. Sadly, when the N&W made the switch from steam to diesel, the town's importance as a maintenance and repair facility quickly diminished. Although the town still serves as a division point, the shops that were once located here are long gone. The town also has a local railroad museum here called the Crewe Railroad Museum, which houses ex-Norfolk and Western 606, an S160-280 consolidation, and N&W 2185, an EMD GP7U. Interestingly, N&W 2185 never worked for the Norfolk and Western. It was originally delivered as a GP7 for the Santa Fe Railway before being rebuilt as a GP7U. Since the town is a crew change point, 611 was stopped here to change crews. As we were waiting here, we decided to explore the area some more, only to realize, soon after we left, 611 started right off. Oh well, we'll be back on the return run. Anyway, as we began our pursuit of the train, we then passed by the Crewe Railroad Museum. After our stop in Crewe, we then caught the Cavalier in Blackstone, Virginia. Here, 611 made some impressive stack talk as she rolled right through town. Ex-Pennsylvania Railroad, 3125 the Paul Revere, is a cafe/lounge car. It was built in 1951 by the Budd Company. Today, it's owned by the Railroad Passenger Car Numbering Bureau, which in turn is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Railroad Passenger Car Alliance. Founded in 1978, the Railroad Passenger Car Alliance is a group made up of smaller groups and individuals who own their own passenger cars. The Railroad Passenger Car Alliance helps members of the group by organizing and arranging special excursion trains that involve members' own passenger cars, such as this train today. Next up are ex-Pennsylvania Railroad 148, the Connellsville Inn, and ex-Pennsylvania Railroad 142, the Franklin Inn. Both cars are coaches, built by the Budd Company in 1949. Today, they are both owned by the Washington, D.C. chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. The Wabash Dome car, the Jackson Square, is ex-Great Northern 1331. The car is a dome/coach car. It was built by the Budd Company in 1955 and now wears the number 9410 for Mid-America Railcar Leasing. New York Central 43 is a tavern/lounge car built by the Budd Company in 1947 for the Central. It is owned by the United Railroad Historical Society of New Jersey. After seeing the train here, we then drove into Petersburg. Once we got parked, we then walked into town. One of the first buildings we saw here was the South Side Depot. Located along River Street, the depot was constructed between 1851 and 1853 by the South Side Railroad. The South Side Railroad was formed in 1846, but didn't start construction until 1849. It ran west from Petersburg on most of the trackage we have seen thus far till it reached Lynchburg, Virginia in 1854. While most of the trackage is still in service by Norfolk Southern, the portion of the railroad between Burkeville and Plamplin, Virginia is now abandoned. Getting back to the depot, the building is more than likely one of the oldest surviving railroad stations in the state of Virginia. The two-story portion of the building was the passenger waiting rooms. The single-story section on the west side is one of the wings used for freight. There was also an east wing on this building, but unfortunately on August 6, 1993, an F4 tornado hit Petersburg and destroyed the east wing of the building, leaving it in ruins. When the South Side Railroad began construction, an engineering team was hired to grade and build the railroad. The team consisted of one chief engineer, 6 assistant engineers, and sadly, 17 enslaved African Americans. Besides them, they also hired 16 contractors to help build the railroad. During the Civil War in late 1861, the railroad employed 378 workers, 80% of whom were African Americans. The station was a high-value target for Union forces during the war. It was shelled so frequently that trains that were approaching the station from the west often stopped at the Fleet Street crossing just west of here. During the Siege of Petersburg, the South Side Railroad was one of the last remaining railroads remaining in Confederate hands. In late March of 1865, Union General Philip H. Sheridan led a successful attack against Confederate forces, capturing Five Forks, Virginia. This led to the Battle of Sutherland Station, which also led to the South Side Railroad to being severed. With the railroad being severed now, General Lee was forced to evacuate Petersburg, as the South Side Railroad was his last supply line. As of today, the South Side Depot is owned by the city. The National Park Service, at the time, was attempting to acquire the depot, with plans of rehabilitating that building and making it into a Civil War museum. As of the present day, that does not seem to have materialized yet. After seeing the South Side Depot, we go right next door to the former Petersburg Union Station. Petersburg Union Station was built between 1909 and 1910 by the Norfolk and Western Railway. It was built to replace an earlier structure that was damaged in a flood. Looking at a map of the present day, the only line running past the station is the former N&W main line, but when the station was built, this site was where the N&W crossed over the Atlantic coastline. Not only was there a junction here, but there was also a sizable yard here and engine facilities for the N&W. The station saw many passenger trains from both roads, such as the N&W's Powhatan Arrow, the Cavalier, and the Pocahontas, and the ACL's Champion, Florida Special, and many other New York, Florida-bound passenger trains. Just recently, I acquired a small collection of photos from this time, so let's take a look. All the photos were supposedly taken in June of 1958. I'll get to why supposedly in a minute. We first began our trip back in time at the western end of the station, just north of the South Side Depot. Our first shot is of N&W 608, one of 611's sister engines, as it simmers away at the platform with one of the famed passenger trains of the N&W. Men were unloading and loading luggage into the baggage cars, and the engine crew were filling 608's tender with water before continuing westward. For our next shot, the photographer crossed to the other side. Our final shot of 608 is of it leaving the station westbound, possibly making an impressive stack talk along the way. 608 would only be in service for just one more year. On May 22, 1959, 608 was retired and later scrapped in Bluefield, West Virginia. After 608, the next four slides we see is of N&W 123 as it rolls down the tracks in the yard. While it looks like one of the famed J's, it is actually a K2 class 482 Mountain. These engines were built in 1919 by Alco's Brooks Locomotive Works. While some of the K2s, such as 123, were streamlined, most remained without streamlining. 123 unfortunately was scrapped either by 1957 or 1959. After seeing 123, we then returned to the station to see ACL 510 at the head of a northbound passenger train. 510 is an EMD E6A, or more commonly known as an E unit. This train has stopped at the station to pick up or drop off more passengers before continuing north to Richmond, Virginia. Now this picture is the reason why I was saying supposedly earlier. When I acquired these photos, the listing said on most of them that they were taken in June of 1958. But according to some websites, the ACL stopped using the station in 1955, moving their operations to a newer station on the west side of town. So, if the websites are correct, these photos were more than likely taken in the early to mid-1950s instead of the late 1950s. As of today, ACL 510 is no longer with us, but the leading classmate, 501, still survives today at the North Carolina Transportation Museum in Spencer. After seeing the ACL, we'll now move to the late afternoon. We are now back at the station, but this time we see NNW 609 at the head of the westbound passenger train. The engineer of 609 poses for the camera as they wait for the highball. The last shot from this collection features NNW 600, the class leader, as it pulls into Petersburg Union Station with yet another westbound passenger train. It's hard to tell, but I believe this shot was taken at the junction where the ACL crosses over the NNW just east of the station. As of the fate of 609, it was retired on May 22, 1959, and met the same fate as 608 in Bluefield, West Virginia. For the class leader 600, sadly, it was retired on June 16, 1959, and scrapped in Portsmouth, Ohio. Although we are now done with this collection of slides, I do have one more photo to show you. We now move back to the ACL side of the station and also move further in time to June 15, 1941. Here we see Atlantic Coastline 1550, a P5A 462 Pacific type at the head of an ACL passenger train. The P5As were built between 1919 and 1920 by Alco's Richmond and Brooks Locomotive Works. 70 of them were built to pull the ACL's premier passenger trains, but by the time this photo was taken, plans were already in the works to replace their fleet of P5As with the soon-to-be R1 class Northerns and later E6As. Between 1949 and 1952, all the P5As, including 1550, were retired and scrapped, with the exception of 1504. 1504, a sister engine to 1550, is owned by U.S. Sugar and is undergoing restoration by FMW Solutions to operate in southern Florida. Anyway, after the ACL left the station in 1955, the Norfolk and Western continued to operate passenger trains out of the station until May 1st, 1971. That date marked the last NNW passenger train to use the station. Despite Amtrak being formed, they declined to continue the NNW's passenger trains. The station sat empty only until 1975. That year, Amtrak moved into the station and used it for their Mountaineer, a Norfolk to Chicago passenger train that operated mostly on the NNW lines. Sadly, this wasn't to last, as by 1977, the Mountaineer was replaced by the Hilltopper, and that train was moved to another station close by, leaving Union Station again with no occupants. The Hilltopper continued operations until 1979, when it was discontinued as well. As of the day, Petersburg Union is now part of the Petersburg Old Town Historic District and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1980. As for the passenger services in Petersburg, Amtrak still serves the city today at their Petersburg Amtrak station. Interestingly, this station is where the ACL moved to in 1955. They called it the Edric Station. We are now at the River Street Railroad crossing, where 611 and its train is parked. Not only were the passengers and rail fans of the excursion train out to see the J, but also the folks of Petersburg as well.
You ought to see the collection of the steam locomotives they got on diesel. And spent a lot of time. I think they will.
Somebody might try to knock you over.
You think you want to go west? You should take that west.
The last place we saw in Petersburg was the old McIlwaine House. The McIlwaine House was built around 1794 by Erasmus Gill. It's a 2.5-story building using a federal-style frame dwelling with a 1.5-story wing on the side. At the time of our visit, the exterior of the building was green with dark green and brown accents paint. The house had many residents, including George H. Jones, mayor of Petersburg from 1815 to 1816, but the house got its name from Archibald Graham McIlwaine, a Petersburg industrialist and financier who made it his residence from 1831 to 1878. The McIlwaine family kept the house all the way up till 1971, when it was saved from the wrecking ball and moved to its present location. A notable feature of this house is that the interior was made up entirely of wood, made by highly skilled craftsmen, with no plaster ornamentation used in the design. As of today, the house is owned by Mr. Alexander C. and Graham Jr., who lovingly maintain the house in either both repairing or replacing parts as needed. The house can be rented out for events such as weddings, wedding receptions, and much more. If you're interested in renting out the house, I'll leave a link to the website where I found the information down below. There you can contact Mr. Alexander or Graham Jr. for more information. After our visit, it was almost time for 611 to depart Petersburg for its return journey. As the passengers were boarding the train, we got into our vehicle and drove to the Road 743 railroad crossing just off of Highway 460 in Sutherland, Virginia. When we got to the crossing, I saw the gates were going down. Assuming this was the westbound 611, I quickly got my camera set up facing east, only to realize an eastbound Norfolk Southern train was coming. Leading this eastbound freight train was NS 8923 and NS 2637. 8923 was a GE C40-9W built in 1996. It was later rebuilt in 2019 as an AC44 C6M at GE's Erie shops and renumbered to 4180. 2637 was an EMD SD70M built in 2004. It worked for Norfolk Southern till it was sold off to Progress Rail in 2020 and scrapped that same year. A little bit after the surprise freight passed, 611's train finally came. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 800290 is another dome/coach car. Now some of you might be wondering, where is this car on the train? Well, it's the Northern Pacific painted dome car named Stampede Pass near the end of the train. The car was built by the Budd Company in 1954. It was built for the CB&Q, but when it was delivered, it was painted in Northern Pacific's colors to be used on the long-distance passenger train, the North Coast Limited. The North Coast operated between Seattle, Washington, and Chicago, Illinois. After seeing the train here, we got some good pacing action of 611 along Road 621 as we made our way into Blackstone, Virginia. Getting back to the CB&Q car on the train, the Northern Pacific operated the train between Seattle and the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Once in the Twin Cities, the train was then operated by the Q the rest of the way to Chicago. As part of this operation, cars such as the Stampede Pass were shared between the two railroads, so passengers didn't have to change trains mid-route. As of today, the car is owned by the American Association of Private Railroad Car Owners, Inc. After Stampede Pass was Iowa Pacific 1394 Private View. Private View was built by the Budd Company in 1955 for the Great Northern Railroad. It is a full-length dome/lounge car built for the Great Northern's flagship passenger train, the Empire Builder. The Empire Builder, like the Northern Pacific's North Coast Limited, ran between Seattle, Washington, and Chicago, Illinois. Just like the Northern Pacific, the Great Northern ran its train between Seattle and the Twin Cities. Once there, the train was handed over to the Q for the rest of its journey to Chicago. The car was also shared between the two roads. After the merger of the Burlington Northern, the car stayed with the BN till it was sold to Amtrak in 1971. Amtrak eventually used the car as a parts source until it was sold back to the BN in 1993, just as a shell with no trucks. It was then stored at BN's former Frisco shops in Springfield, Missouri. In '94, the BN then sold the car to Holland American West Tours, where they rebuilt the car into running condition. In 1997, it was operated on the Alaska Railway and given the name Deshka. The car stayed in Alaska until it was sold in 2009 to Iowa Pacific. Iowa Pacific repainted, renamed, and renumbered the car back to its original Empire Builder scheme back when it was first built. As of today, the car is now owned by a company under the hoarding marks SDCX. Unfortunately, the trail of knowledge about this car seems to go cold here, as that's all the information I was able to find as of today. After our pacing action, we then saw 611 as it passed under the Highway 460 Business Route Bridge in the small community of Norway Courthouse, Virginia. Just like earlier in the day, the Cavalier will come to a stop here to change crews. Our next spot was at the Fazmart convenience store and gas station. Not only did the store provide a good place to fill up, but it also provided a great view of both the yard and the main line. With the new crew on board, 611 and its train left crew to get back on the Blue Ridge District. As the train makes its way out of crew, let's talk about the last car on the train. The last car on board this train was TCRX 800129, formerly Seaboard Airline Hollywood Beach. The car was built by the Pullman Standard Company in 1956 for the Seaboard as a sleeper/lounge car with 5 bedrooms and a sunroom. The car's main feature is its large, oversized windows on the end of the car, which gives the passengers the feeling that they were in a regular dome car. The Seaboard couldn't use regular dome cars on their passenger trains due to the height restrictions in the tunnels of New York City. After seeing the train depart crew, our next spot we saw the train at was at a railroad crossing on Roberts Lawn Drive / Road 673 in Green Bay, Virginia. Earlier in the video, we were seeing the train from that bridge in the distance. Protecting the western entrance of this siding was this classic N&W position light signal. Sadly, as of today, this signal, along with many other precision light signals along this district, have been replaced with much more modern Darth Vader signals. The Hollywood Beach was operated on the Seaboard's Silver Meteor, which ran from New York to Miami, Florida, and was only one of 3 cars built for the railroad. In 1971, with the formation of Amtrak, the car was then sold to them, and it operated with them until it was retired in 1981. As to what I have gathered, the car is owned by Willits Railcar Services, LLC, but used by the American Association of Private Railroad Cars for excursions. As we continued our chase, it began to rain. The next spot we saw the train at was along Road 671 County Line Road, just northwest of Abilene, Virginia. Here, the train made another unscheduled stop. Soon enough, after solving whatever the problem was, 611 and its train got back underway in the rain. After seeing the 611 here, the next place we saw the train at was at the Appomattox Station in Appomattox, Virginia. Here, we are at the Church Street Railroad crossing right next to the 1923 built station. As of today, the station is used as a visitor center for the town. With the setting sun coming, the last spot we saw the train at just before arriving back in Lynchburg was right back where we first saw the 611 at speed, along East Brook Road / Route 660, where the NS main line crosses over Opossum Creek. After seeing the train here, we then drove back into Montview Yard, where we caught the Cavalier as it pulled in, finishing its run.
How old is this train? It's pretty old. It was built in the 50s.
With the train now in Lynchburg, this brought an end to our day. Besides the Cavalier, 611, along with 765 and 4501, would go on to pull many other excursions for Norfolk Southern's 21st Century Steam program in the 2015 season. Sadly, by December of 2015, NS announced an abrupt end to the 21st Century Steam program. Despite the steam program coming to an end, NS would still allow steam engines such as 765 and 611 to run on its rails. 765 would run on NS trackage to get to events such as Steam in the Valley, and 611 would go on to pull more excursions on Norfolk Southern in the states of Virginia and North Carolina. Till 2018, when new regulations on private charter trips prevented the J from running on the main line. Combining it with Norfolk Southern requiring PTC engines to lead all trains on their main lines meant that 611 would not be able to lead any trains until PTC was installed. Between 2019 and early 2023, 611 would run on the Strasburg Railroad, and in the fall of 2023, the J would then return to the main line for the Virginia Scenic Railroad on the Buckingham Branch Railroad. And now this brings an end to the video. If you're interested in riding behind a 611 or seeing the locomotive for yourself, please go and check out the Virginia Museum of Transportation's website as well as their Facebook page. Also, keep an eye on the Virginia Scenic Railway's website and Facebook page as well. I suspect next year 611 will return to the Virginia Scenic. But if I'm wrong, I still say keep an eye on VMT's stuff as well, so you don't miss out. I'll leave a link down in the description box below so you can check all that out. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this revisit on a classic. Had a little fun remaking this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a great day. See you later.